Good afternoon. This is a new video by Dana Bell. This is how faith and prayer is for those of us who are in the arts. This includes writers, poets, musicians, photographers, actors, any other professions that I haven't named here. And I actually found just earlier today the perfect verse. I'm actually going to read it in two different versions. The first is the King James Version. It's Proverbs 3:6. And it says, "In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy path." My favorite version is actually the New Man Bible. And Proverbs 3:6 says in this one, "In all your ways know him, and he will make your paths smooth." And that is what we're going to be working from as far as praying and believing God to give you the words, the music, whatever it is that you need in whichever art field you're in. Primarily this is directed at writers, but the principles are applicable to anyone, anywhere in the arts who does anything creative. I'm not sure when I personally started using prayer as part of my writing procedure. My prayers are not complicated. They are very, very simple. I will sit down to write and I will go either say, "Thanks, Dad, for letting me write today," or if I'm feeling kind of lighthearted about the whole thing, say, "Hey, Dad, come on, do you want to come play?" Those are prayers. Very simple prayers. And I sit down at my computer and I start writing. The next thing I know, 1,000 words, 1,500 has gone by. On a good day, it's 3,000, depending on what my project is. I consider 1,000 to 1,500 a pretty good day. Now, as I said, I'm not sure when I started doing that, but I noticed a marked difference, not only in my writing, but also in my attitude, in my willingness to sit down and write, because that is what I'm called to do. And I'm not sure how to explain it, because the other very important part of this is faith. Now, Christ was talking in the New Testament, and I'm not sure exactly where it's at, where he's saying, look at all the animals, look at the trees, look at all of this. They don't go out, they don't work in the fields, they don't have houses, they don't work a job, and yet God takes care of them. They get fed every day. They don't worry like we do. And we need to be like them. Just believe that God is going to take care of them. In fact, go ask your Father, what do you need? What do you need? And I'm going to share a personal story about that. I lost my job in 2019. My biggest need really at that point was not to sit and make money. I was exhausted. We didn't get much vacation time where I worked. We worked every single holiday, including Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day, Easter. We worked them all. So I was exhausted after about 3.5 years, completely and totally just worn out, couldn't think straight. I was so tired. And my biggest need right there was time. Time to sit down, time to read a book, time to just relax, time to sleep in if I needed to, time to take a nap. That was my need. Now, I kind of recognized it a little bit after it happened, which is not unusual. But that was my biggest need, was not to go right straight back to work, but to do that. I had enough money to get by, and just when I thought I was going to run out, I got a temp job that I very much enjoyed. That was done in about, I started at the beginning of August, and by mid-October I was out of a job. That's the way temp assignments go. I was out of work for a while, and then I got another temp job. And it was just kind of like one temp job after another temp job. When the pandemic started, I had been working since, I think, the beginning of January, and I was out of a job by April. I was a contractor. They had no reason to hold on to me. They sent all of their people home to work, but the contractors still had to come into the office, and that was a little bit scary. And then I was out of work again for a while, long while. And I reached a point in January of 2021 where I literally had no job, no prospects, nothing. Had no idea what to do. And faith. You know how Christ said, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, and if you've ever seen a mustard seed, it's a really tiny little thing. I've seen a lot of seeds that are really, really tiny. If you have that much faith, you can say to that mountain, hey, go throw yourself in the ocean, and it will. That's probably not the right thing, but you understand the context of what I'm saying. My faith got down to that big. And then I just stopped and said, you know what? Father, you have never failed to take care of me, so I'm going to trust you to do it. And you know what? He did. All of my bills were covered. Now, mind, I only had $1,000 in the bank, but still, everything got paid. Got a little behind on my credit cards, but that was okay. The end of March, I got another temp assignment, and in June, by what I call a pure fluke, I landed the job that I currently have. And I work from home, which is a big plus. I don't have to worry about getting up earlier. I don't have to worry about commuting in. I don't have to worry about snow. I don't know about anybody else, but snow is a nightmare here in this town because we have so many people who moved in who can't drive in the snow. So I don't have to worry about somebody not knowing how to drive in snow and hitting me. I know how to drive in snow. I grew up in Idaho. But when you have people who never knew how to drive in snow, it gets to be a big challenge. And that's kind of a little bit off the track. But I'm just sharing how sometimes your faith just gets so little, itsy bitsy. As long as there is something there left, something that you're like, God, you've taken care of me before. I believe that you will do it again. And even if he takes care of you in a way that you're not expecting, he still took care of you. It's not a matter of, this is the way I want you to take care of me. It's a matter of, I trust you to do it. Now, how all of this, I've had a lot of life experience with God. And he has never failed to take care of me, even when I least deserved it. He gave me a bicycle for free, again, when I least deserved it. And I enjoyed that bike. I had a blast on that bike for an entire summer. But this is our God. He gives us the need when we have it, when we ask. Even if it's a one-word prayer. And yes, there are one-word prayers that you can say. But because I've been through all of this stuff through my life with God, good times, bad times, hard times, getting bills caught up, God has still been there. He has proved to be faithful. And that is the biggest thing I want to get through everybody's heads. God is faithful. We're not always. But God is. He looks after his children. One way or another, even if you don't deserve it or not. He loves you. Remember that. Now, having been through all these experiences with God, to finally get to what my point has been, I know that when I sit down at the computer, and I look at that and I do my prayer, I am trusting God wholeheartedly with the faith of a child that he is going to give me the words. God gives me the words. When I go back and look at some of my earlier writing, I sit there and go, how in the world did I write this? I'm genuinely just surprised. I went back recently to read God's Gift, which that book I had started. I was writing it on my lunch hour at one of my jobs. That got interrupted, and I think it was 2 years later when I finally got back to it. And I was at work, and while I was doing this work, because I didn't need my brain to do it, the whole last part of the book unfolded itself. And when I went back and read the book, and when I finished that book, it's like God had planted all these little seeds that I did not see to give me the end of my book the way it should have been written. Now, this is a God thing, and he does this in every single book, story, you name it, that I write. God plants the seeds. He gives you revelation. He tells you and inspires you what needs to be there. And as I said, I have the faith of a child. If God said it, he's going to do it. I don't not believe it. So, first of all, let's start by having the faith of a child. And when you pray and you sit down to do that writing, believe God is going to give you the words, however many words that is. I've had days when I've written 250 words. I've had days where I've written 3,000 words. I think my best day was a 6,000 word day, but those don't happen very often. My average is between 1,000 and 1,500. Also, accept whatever kind of writer you are. Do you sit down and write daily? Do you write once a week? Do you write, like I do, sporadically? Which means whenever. There could be weeks between when I write things, or sometimes years, which, again, is okay with me. I've learned a little trick with my stories. When I'm not sure when I'm going to get back to something, I leave myself a ton of notes. You know, here's where I think the next scene is going to be. Here is questions that still need to be answered. Oh, and by the way, you brought this up. Make sure that you take care of that. So I leave these notes for myself, so I don't have to start from scratch. I don't have to go through, reread the whole thing, and try to figure out where it went. Now, I did that for years. And I have learned, and as writers, we learn as we go. So this is where this little trick of leave yourself notes came from, because I got so tired of doing that. I don't mind with my fan fiction. That I do for fun and practice. But for the important stuff, for the original work, yeah, I leave myself notes. Because it's like, I don't know when I'm going to be back to this. I don't want to have to start from scratch. And I'm a panzer, just so you guys know. I know there are people who outline. I'm not one of them. Outline doesn't work for me. I like having the freedom to, if my character suddenly decides, as I had happen in one of my books, just to kind of give you an idea, one of my characters ended up being pregnant. And I went, what? What do you mean you're pregnant? That wasn't part of the story idea. But, okay, that's cool. You're pregnant. We're just going to go with it. And these things happen to me all the time. I don't know why it's important this character is pregnant. I'll probably find out in the next book. Things like that happen all the time. These little jewels that slip in. And I love it. And yes, that book is currently at my publisher and will be coming out next year. It's a very different book. And I write very different books. I don't write to market. I don't do a lot of things. You know, I write what I'm inspired to write and what I would like to read, not the formula romances, which, yes, I read those, but sometimes they get boring. I even write romances, just but under a pen name, which has been a fun challenge because I do different things with those too. Now, still kind of on the topic of what we're talking about. I'm an editor. I've done edited a bunch of anthologies. I have worked with secular writers. I have written with Christian writers. Anybody want to hazard a guess at who writes the more creative and original stories. Believe it or not, it's the Christian writers who do. Yeah, let me repeat that. Believe it or not, it is the Christian writers who have the more original and creative stories. Question is why? Because we are connected to the ultimate creator, to God. Now really stop and think about that. We are inspired by the Holy Spirit. We are connected to the ultimate creator. And so our stories have elements in it that other writers' stories do not. Thus the more original and creative tales. And yes, I share this with secular audiences, and the whole room goes silent when I say that. Because they're like, what? What do you mean they write the more creative and more original stories? It's because they do. I know, because I've worked with both. One of the advantages of being an editor, and yes, I'm a very good editor, and no, I'm not taking clients right now. Give me time, but not right now. But the bottom line in all of this is your writing career belongs to God. That story that you write belongs to God. And to quote one of my fellow Christian writers who also writes for the secular audience, I loved when he said, I am responsible to God for every word that I write. And so are we. Whether you are writing a sweet little romance, whether you are writing a military sci-fi, even if you're writing a paranormal romance and, ooh, there's a sex scene, you are still responsible to God for what you write. And when you are writing under his inspiration, it amazes me, some of the stuff that happens. In my one paranormal romance, which is R-rated, I'll be honest with you, it is R-rated, for the violence, for suggestiveness, and yes, there is one non-explicit sex scene in it, which was necessary, and they're married when it happens. That's the biggest difference in what I did, is no premarital sex. They were married when they finally had sex, and there's a big long story behind it. If you're curious, I have another video on here about my books, which I do readings from each of them. Not so much for the anthology collection, but for the other 3 books, I do readings from them. So if you're curious, go ahead and look those up. But I cannot stress at this time how important that prayer time with God is. Like I said, mine are like simple 1-sentence, sit down, believe God for the inspiration. Believe God is going to give you the words. Don't make a limit on it. Don't say, I only want to write 3,000 words when God's like, I'm only giving you 1,000 today. That's okay. You know, everybody worries about word counts, and I'm going to share what a pro writer shared. He was working, and he wrote on his lunch break. He wrote 250 words a day on his lunch break. In a year, he had a novel. And sometimes as a writer, we kind of have to take that the long view, as I call it. You know, don't expect your first book to be a bestseller. It takes time to develop that reading audience. As I love to share, it took George R.R. Martin 30 years to become an overnight success. And that is what we should aspire to be. But more importantly, when we're writing, and God gives you those words, there are people who are going to be reading your books and taking away a message. I tend to sneak things in. In my winter trilogy, they all have different belief systems. I do a lot of Egyptian mythology. But I also have another name for God, who's called the Provider. And some of my characters believe in the Provider. They put away their Egyptian beliefs and they believe in the Provider. But I kind of snuck it in. It's subtle. It's very, very subtle. I think I had one book where I was very blatant about it because I wanted to show Christianity as a lifestyle, not a religion. One of my friends of another faith said, it's awful preachy. But it really wasn't, because it showed what it's like to live as a Christian, as a lifestyle. And the funny thing about those characters that I used in the original book, they actually came from fan fiction. They were characters that I created for a certain series. And I got so much feedback on my male character, who is a pastor, a military pastor. He was very well liked. And I'm like, well, I wonder what happened if I took him and his sisters out for a spin in original work. Thus I ended up with God's Gift, which, again, an amazing book. Not a long novel, it's a short novel. Oh, and I did find out, according to Science Fiction Writers Association, anything over 40,000 words is considered a novel. Just an FYI, everybody. And I think it's on their page, too. I don't remember where I saw it. On Facebook, maybe. Who knows? I'm like all over the place. But anything over 40,000 words is a book. Mine run around 50 to 55. At the moment. I'm hoping to have a longer one, but at the moment, and I'm okay with that. Now that I've reached on a bunch of trivia, my head is filled of all kinds of stuff that sometimes comes out when I least expect it to. But let's go back to Proverbs 3:6. In all your ways, acknowledge Him. And I'm just going to use that first part of the word. Just in all your ways, acknowledge Him. Or in all your ways, know Him. Make God part of your creative process. And one of the most successful film companies that I know does this is the Kindred Brothers. If you're not familiar with their films, look them up. But they do this. They pray for every single film that they do. And they do amazing work. They really do. But in your books, include God as part of the process. Every single book that I have written, there is a dedication to God, first and foremost. There may be other dedications, like to my cats, or to my mom, or someone else. But God's always, always, always first. Because without God, without His inspiration, without my faith in Him, without the prayer, I wouldn't have a book. And so I'm encouraging you, everybody, whether you're a writer, a poet, an actor, a musician, photographer, or in some other aspect of the arts, in all your ways, acknowledge Him. Everyone have a wonderful rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy this video.